Hello everyone, welcome to today's show. We have a good one for you as always. A very sad show though, because we are going to be talking today about the latest in the coronavirus, the possibility of entering a brand new phase in the pandemic. We'll take a look at what that means for everyone across the country as we deal with that. We'll take a look at the looting in the wake of the tragedy that killed George Floyd. And the case for who's actually really doing the looting that really counts in today's society, including some of the politicians' response and some of the people that we're supposed to like's response to this tragedy. Also, Donald Trump signing an order aimed at social networks as Twitter doubles down on labeling and fact-checking Trump's tweets. That is what we're going to be talking about today. So thank you so much for joining us here once again. But we are talking about, hopefully, obviously, I just do want to start by saying hopefully everybody is doing well. And it is a really, obviously, incredibly depressing time. Obviously, with the midst of a pandemic, a lot of people, there is still an incredible amount of suffering. And it kind of gets lost in the shuffle with a bunch of things. And we see a bunch of stuff and people being like, this is obviously a crazy and awful situation. It's a horrifying situation that we see with George Floyd, but it really is and it takes away a lot of the attention on the coronavirus thing, but there is obviously a lot of people who are out there suffering through the evils of this pandemic and the evils of people who are in charge, cost-cutting, and unnecessarily keeping stores open or unnecessarily laying people off. And some businesses are also really incredibly crushed by this, and that's something that we shouldn't ignore too. So hopefully everybody's out there doing very well, staying in there strong, and hopefully surrounded by people who you admire and like to be around. So yeah, I'm just pretty much chilling with the fam at this moment in time. All right, but I do want to talk about this thing that we have here. With coronavirus, the simplest way to track the progress of any outbreak is by seeing how many new cases and deaths are reported in a given area in each day. In the United States, the falling numbers in some of the hardest hit places offered glimmers of hope. Totals for the country have been on a downward curve, and in former hotspots like New York and New Jersey, the count appears to have peaked. So we, in really where the areas in the virus have hit the hardest, we do see the cases and the totals of deaths and things like that go down. We can see the virus is running its course on New York, and it really, what a course it has run, right? We have seen so many people die, and a lot of it, and I've been very, very critical of Andrew Cuomo and Donald Trump and the way they've handled this on the show, and I think with very, very good reason, but we are looking towards better things in New York and New Jersey. But infections and deaths are rising in more than a dozen states as they are in countries around the world, and not a sign the pandemic may be entering a new phase. Wisconsin saw its highest single-day increase in confirmed cases 2 weeks again after the state's highest court overturned a stay-at-home order. Cases are also on the rise in Alabama, Arkansas, California, and North Carolina, which on Thursday reported some of the state's highest numbers of hospitalizations and reported deaths since the crisis began. Big metropolitan areas like Fayetteville, Arkansas, Yuma, Arizona, and Roanoke and Charlottesville, Virginia, data shows that new highs may only be days or weeks away. So there's a bunch of people going down, and the good thing is if you're kind of a little bit of a nerd like me and you want to really monitor how things are going on and are kind of worried about the pandemic, the New York Times actually has a very cohesive database of all the counties and all the states and all the cases they've been reporting. They compile it very, very nicely. So that is a little bit of a top tip for you if you're looking to find out more about that. Outbreaks have accelerated especially sharply in Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, Mexico, and Peru, leading the World Health Organization to say on Tuesday it's considered the Americas to be the new center of the pandemic. And although much of the Middle East seems to have averted the catastrophe, even as the virus ravaged Iran early, case counts have been swelling in Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE. Reported cases are not perfect measures to chart the spread of the virus because they depend on how much testing is done. Death counts are less dependent on testing, though official numbers are typically undercounts. Both counts, though, can indicate how the outbreak is evolving, especially in places where lockdown rules are easing or where governments have been ineffective at slowing the spread and offer early clues about hotspots. So this is of course reporting here from the New York Times. It kind of shows you the fact that a lot of things are the signs that a lot of people worry about is that the next big thing that I think a lot of people worry about right now is Wisconsin, and we really see that coming through with the conservative majority that's over there, the conservative Supreme Court majority that overturned the state's stay-at-home order, effectively removing most of the serious restrictions on its residents. But it can take several weeks after changes in behavior, like the increased movement interactions associated with the end of a stay-at-home order, for the effective transmission to be reflected in the data, because we all know about that 14-day transmission period that's going to be very, very direct. I mean, if you've just been paying attention to the news at all, you've seen a big drop in like social distancing, and or at least over the past few weeks, the weather's gotten nicer. Like you've been, and I think everyone can probably attest to this. Like more people have started to venture outside and kind of explore and take a grasp at normal life, and that and of course nothing bad's happened yet, but we have to be keeping on nothing too crazy, like in terms of the rise in deaths. We haven't seen like a massive spike, but if we keep this up, like the thing is, one point I'm trying to make is it takes a long time for things to fully hit. Like we're kind of in a delay pattern of a few weeks. So in Wisconsin, there were indications that the virus was still spreading before the order was lifting, but in the weeks since restrictions have returned, the case numbers have continued to grow. That is all we're going to talk about for the coronavirus today. Coming up next, we will talk about the reaction in the wake of the coronavirus. Not the coronavirus, but the George Floyd tragedy in Minneapolis.
Get ready for week 2 of our Outer Banks series. This week on the show, we talk once again to Tatum Walsh about the rest of the Outer Banks season, all of its weirdness and relative peculiarities, including the crazy season finale, and where it stands in the pantheon of teen dramas, Netflix binge-watching addictions, and does it hold up? And are we going to be excited for what looks like a possible season 2? Also, I mean, really? Sarah, come on. We're going to be talking about all that stuff this Friday on an all-new episode of That's Interesting, our second Outer Banks episode. Again, Tatum Walsh will be joining us again this Friday. It comes out. See you there. You better listen. Please, trust me. You got to tune in.
That is tonight, and of course, I really don't have, that's coming out actually in 61 minutes, as of it's around 10:59 as the clock's ticking closer and closer to new episode. That's interesting. All right, so I do want to just kind of play this little clip here, and it shows you about where the Democrats are on this. Really, I think very, very clearly. We see people like, Amy Klobuchar, who was awful, absolutely awful, refused to prosecute any police officer when she was the prosecutor of Hennepin County. Sound familiar? Well, that's where Minneapolis is in Minnesota. And she really let a lot of awful cops, including Derek Chauvin, who, by the way, killed, I think in 2006, killed a Native American man and was let off the hook, or just wasn't prosecuted by Amy Klobuchar, prosecutor of Hennepin, or head prosecutor of Hennepin at the time. And now we see another Democrat refusing, or really acting like he's not going to press charges on anything happening with this Floyd case. So, yeah, and that's really a kind of resurfacing and a really tough loss for Amy Klobuchar, who's probably not going to be considered VP anymore. And I think that's very, very good. She was a very good person anyway. And this is another, to add on to my case here, nice clip from a town hall in the beginning of 2019. Was Nancy Pelosi asked a question about Black Lives Matter and the movement of Black Lives Matter. And I think that'll be a good jumping off point for our discussion.
The recognition that Black Lives Matter.
Congratulations on the election.
Thank you.
Do you support the Black Lives Matter movement?
Well, I support the recognition that Black Lives Matter, for sure, and I have incorporated that in many of my statements. I think all lives matter, yes, but we really have to redress past grievances in terms of how we have addressed the African American community. I had a real privilege yesterday to address the Black Caucus, the swearing in of the new Black Caucus members. At least eight new members elected from places that are not majority Black communities. So this was a real breakthrough. So I think that we're all, working together to make sure that every part of our community, whether it's the immigrant community, whether it's the Black community, whether it's women's community, and the rest, not only matter but rule.
I think it's very telling. It's the all lives matter type thing. And when we talk about looting, the way people talk about this, obviously we've seen a lot of looting done by people throughout Minnesota and in the wake of these past 2 nights and kind of uprisings going on. But I do want to bring everyone's attention to a name that has been who's right now, I believe, trending quite highly on Twitter, right behind I think Amy Klobuchar, and that's the name Jacob Peterson. There has been a video of this guy who, at least according to all possible accounts from what we've seen, Jacob Peterson is of the St. Paul Police Department and has been outed as the individual who, in a mask, an umbrella, and all black gear and gloves, taken a hammer to windows through AutoZone, and I think that's what people are saying right now. The police department has yet to respond to that, but that name is quite, apparently his ex-wife actually came out and outed him. So if you go on Twitter right now, you're going to see a video of this guy who is actually an undercover MPD, Minnesota Police Department officer, coming out and smashing windows of an AutoZone. And yeah, he was captured on camera and really started, actually, according to people who are on the ground, they're kick-starting some of the riots in South Minneapolis. And it kind of shows you where the Minnesota Police Department is looking at here. What are they trying to do? What is the mindset? How are they handling this? We see a bunch of people outside the home of Derek Chauvin, the guy there who did this. It is... I think it's very, very telling. It's you really have to wonder, what are they saying in their police precincts when they're not being looted and destroyed and their windows being broken? How are they thinking about the situation? What is their perspective? Are they disgusted? Is the whole of the Minneapolis police, or at least the majority of the Minneapolis Police Department, disgusted and want to see some sort of mass action against this group of four, or at least the guy who put the knee on George Floyd's neck? I mean, when you see people coming out, literally cops coming out and doing this, it's really hard to draw that kind of conclusion. It really is. I mean, there's video out tonight of protesters and just people in the street standing around, kind of almost really walking somewhat aimlessly, and they all of a sudden guy hops out of his police car and starts macing people. This is Minneapolis, actually. Sorry. Just literally spraying what seemed to be pretty much bystanders of people. No one's looting, no one's doing any kind of rioting, but they just drive by and all of a sudden open a can of pepper spray and just fire it at people, and people just scatter. This is just horrifying. It's they're trying to make the situation worse. It is and there's now new video tonight in I forget where, but there's a new video tonight of this guy getting literally I think in California, I believe. This is Linwood, California. A sheriff's deputy in Los Angeles just entered this guy's vehicle in what looks to be a traffic stop